You're standing in your garden at the end of July, and your tomato plant looks like a bush that ate another bush. It's taller than you. It's got maybe 40 leaves for every ripe tomato you can find. You paid $4 for that little seedling back in May, and right now it feels like you're watering a houseplant that just refuses to do its one job. Somewhere under all that green, there might be 6 or 7 tomatoes, and half of them have a soft brown spot where they're touching the dirt. That's not bad luck. That's not a bad year. That's a plant that never got pruned, and honestly, it was never your fault. Pruning tomatoes used to be something every kid learned standing next to a parent or a grandparent in the garden. Nobody wrote it in a book because nobody thought they'd need to. It just got passed down, hand to hand, season after season. Somewhere along the way, a lot of us stopped getting that lesson. My name's Everett, and I grew up on a small farm in the Ozarks, the kind of place where the tomato patch fed the whole family from July clear through the first frost. My grandmother ran that patch for almost 60 years, and she could walk down a row of plants and tell you in about 2 seconds which ones needed attention. I learned most of what I know standing next to her with a pair of clippers in my hand, getting corrected more times than I can count. I'm not a scientist, and I'm not selling you anything fancy. I'm just going to hand you what she handed me. There are 7 things she always did to her tomato plants, every single season. And today I'm walking you through every one of them, in order, the same way she taught me. Before we get into it, I'll mention one thing, just once, and then leave it alone. If you want a simple one-page version of this pruning schedule to keep in your garden shed, there's a link below for that. Now let's get into the 7 things. The first thing she always checked was suckers, and if you've never heard that word, it just means the little shoot that grows in the crook where a branch meets the main stem. Picture the letter Y. The main stem goes up, a branch goes off to the side, and right in that armpit-looking spot, a brand new stem starts trying to grow. That's a sucker. If you let it grow, it turns into a whole new stem with its own branches and its own flowers, and pretty soon your one tomato plant is really acting like 3 or 4 plants crammed into one spot. That sounds like more tomatoes, but it almost never works out that way. The plant only has so much energy, so much water, so much food coming up from the roots. Every sucker you leave on is another mouth at the dinner table, splitting up food that could have gone into fewer, bigger, better tomatoes. My grandmother's rule was simple. Check every plant once a week, and any sucker smaller than your finger gets pinched off with your thumb and finger right at the base. Once they get bigger than that, you switch to clippers so you don't tear the stem. Do this every week. Don't let it slide. That's the verdict. Skip it, and by August you've got a tangled mess instead of a productive plant. The second thing on her list was the bottom leaves, the ones close to the ground. Any leaf touching the dirt or hanging within about a foot of it came off. This one surprised me the first time she showed me, because it looks like you're just throwing away good, healthy green leaves. But here's the plain reason behind it. Soil holds fungus and bacteria, the tiny living things that can make a plant sick. When rain splashes, or when you water from above, little drops of dirt bounce up onto those low leaves. If a leaf is sick, that splash carries the sickness right up into the rest of the plant. It's the same reason your mother probably told you not to sit on a park bench with a wet coat. You're keeping the sick stuff away from the healthy stuff. So once a plant is about knee-high, go through and clip off anything low, anything shaded, anything that's basically just sitting in the splash zone. Do this and skip worrying about losing a few leaves, because the plant grows plenty more. The third thing was deciding how many main stems to let the plant keep, and this is the one most people never learn at all. Most tomato plants, if you leave every sucker on, will try to grow into a wide, sprawling bush with 8 or 10 stems all going in different directions. My grandmother almost always kept hers down to 1 main stem, or sometimes 2 if the variety was a smaller, bushier type. 1 strong stem, trained straight up a stake or a string, put all its energy into fewer tomatoes that grew bigger and ripened faster. Think of it like a family with one paycheck. If that paycheck has to feed 2 kids, those 2 kids eat well. If it has to feed 10 kids, everybody gets a little bit and nobody gets enough. That's what happens with stems and tomatoes. Pick your main stem early, in the first couple weeks after transplanting, and every sucker after that gets removed unless you've decided to keep a second stem on purpose. Do this early. Don't wait until the plant is already a jungle, because untangling it later is a lot harder on the plant. The fourth thing was timing, and this one is about when you make your cuts, not what you're cutting. She never pruned in the middle of a hot afternoon, and she never pruned right after a rain. Morning, after the dew dried off, but before the heat came on, that was her window. Here's the plain reason. Every time you cut a plant, you're opening a little wound, and that wound is wet and soft for a little while after the cut. If it's hot and humid, that wound is basically an open door for fungus and bacteria to walk right in. Morning cuts get a chance to dry and start healing before the worst heat of the day, and dry conditions mean less of that fungus floating around looking for a way in. So the verdict here is simple. Prune on a dry morning, and if it rained the day before, wait one more day if you can. Skip pruning in wet, muggy weather whenever you have a choice. The fifth thing, and this is where the mid-season part of the video comes in, was tool care. And I'll be honest, this is the one most people skip completely, myself included when I was younger. My grandmother wiped her clippers with rubbing alcohol between plants, not just between garden beds, between individual plants. Here's why that plain little habit matters so much. If one plant has a hidden disease, even one you can't see yet, the blade of your clippers can carry it straight to the next healthy plant you cut. It's like using the same fork for a sick person and a healthy person without washing it. You might not see anything wrong, but you've still passed something along. A quick wipe with a rag and some rubbing alcohol takes about 5 seconds. Do it between every single plant, not just every session. That's the verdict, and it can be the difference between losing one plant to disease and losing your whole row. Since we're already about halfway through the list, this is a good spot to mention that everything we've covered so far works the same, whether you've got 2 tomato plants in pots on a balcony or 40 plants in a big backyard garden. The scale changes, but the habits don't. Let's keep going. The sixth thing on her list was topping the plant, which just means cutting off the very top growing tip, and she only did this late in the season, usually about a month before the first expected frost in our area. Here's the plain reason behind it. A tomato plant, left alone, will keep trying to grow taller and make new flowers right up until it dies from cold. But new flowers that late in the season don't have enough warm days left to turn into ripe tomatoes. They just steal energy from the tomatoes that are already growing and have a real chance of ripening. By cutting off that top growing tip, you're telling the plant, in a way, stop starting new projects and finish the ones you've already got going. All that energy that would have gone into new growth gets pushed into the fruit that's already on the vine, helping it size up and ripen faster. Mark your average first frost date, count back about 4 weeks, and top your plants then. Do this every year without fail if you want a strong finish to the season, and skip it only if your season is unusually long. The seventh and last thing, and honestly the one she reminded me about the most, was not overdoing it. This sounds strange after 6 things telling you to cut stuff off, but she was firm about this one. A tomato plant needs its leaves. Leaves are where the plant turns sunlight into food through a process you might have heard of called photosynthesis, which is really just a fancy word for how a plant eats sunlight and turns it into energy. If you get too aggressive and strip off too many leaves trying to make the plant look tidy, you're taking away its ability to feed itself and the fruit hanging on it. Worse, tomatoes that lose their leaf cover can actually get sun scald, which looks like a pale, leathery patch on the fruit where it got too much direct sun with no shade at all. So the rule she gave me was to always leave enough leaf cover to gently shade the fruit, never strip a branch bare, and only remove what's dead, yellowing, diseased, or genuinely in the way. Do this with a light hand, That's the verdict. And skip the urge to make the plant look like a clean little tree, because that clean look usually means you've gone too far. Now here's something I've thought about a lot over the years. It seems like pruning tomatoes the right way used to just be common knowledge, the kind of thing every family passed down without even thinking about it as a lesson. I think what happened is that as more people moved off farms and into towns, and as grocery stores made tomatoes something you just picked up on your way home instead of something you grew, that quiet, hands-on knowledge stopped getting passed along. Nobody sat down and decided to erase it. It just wasn't needed day to day anymore, so fewer people bothered teaching it, and fewer people bothered learning it. That's just my take on it, not a fact carved in stone, but it's what I've seen happen in my own family and the families around me. So let's bring it all back together. Check for suckers every week and pinch them off small. Remove the low leaves near the soil so disease can't splash up. Decide on one main stem, or two if you want, early in the season. Prune on dry mornings, never in wet heat. Wipe your clippers between plants. Top the plant about a month before frost. And through all of it, never strip a plant bare, because it still needs those leaves to feed itself and shade its fruit. Here's what I want you to do this week. Pick one plant, just one, walk out there this week while it's still light out, and do the sucker check and the low leaf check on that single plant. That's it, nothing fancy, just one plant to start building the habit. Down in the comments, I'd love to know what variety of tomato your family always grew, the one with the name that maybe only your grandparents or your neighbors ever called it by. Every region seems to have its own name for a plant that showed up somewhere else under a totally different label, and I like hearing what yours is. Picture this a few weeks from now. Whoever in your life has been teasing you about your tomato plants, the neighbor who says gardening is more trouble than it's worth, the family member who doesn't believe homegrown tastes any different from store-bought, hand them a tomato off a plant you pruned this way. Let them see for themselves. And again, if you want that simple one-page pruning schedule to hang in your shed so you're not trying to remember all 7 steps by heart, it's linked below. No pressure either way. If this kind of thing is useful to you, stick around and subscribe, because we've got a lot more of this old, hands-on knowledge to get through together. Next time, we're talking about saving tomato seeds the traditional way, so that patch you just pruned can feed you again next year without spending a dime at the